and thank you for taking time to listen to my presentation. My name is Tom Russell. I am a seventh grade social studies teacher here in Penn Manor School District. I actually teach social studies at Manor Middle School, and part of my principal certification is to, um, begin looking at some specific policies. And one policy in particular that I wanted to address is the use of or misuse of social media, specifically here in Penn Manor School District. Now, as I begin this presentation, one thing that I wanted to do is, kind of point out a few things. One of the first things is looking at the current technology that is employed here at Penn Manor. What technology is available to our kids. And the second thing, and probably the most important, is looking at the current policies that are in place and when those policies were established, and what happens when kids abuse social media or are using technology in an inappropriate way. We have a plethora of resources available to these kids, but we um, have to make sure that they're using technology in an appropriate way. And finally, we want to look at some of the statistics or some of the data that suggests like what's happening to some of these students who are using technology, and potentially some of the negative impacts that are arising from kids who are not using media in the best ways. So before we get into a lot of the logistics, I just want to look at very briefly about how do we get here? Essentially, going back a few years, we have 11 elementary schools, and they have basically gone one-to-one with a laptop initiative program. Now, out of a bulk of those schools, 275 students have all been integrated with some kind of open source material. We have two middle schools, Manor Middle School and Margaretville, along with the high schools, and they have gone complete full laptop integration. But with that, and most importantly, uh, students in middle and high school have full access to pretty much social media, specifically like Facebook, which is actually installed on their laptops. YouTube is not filtered. Students have direct access to YouTube, can watch any YouTube clip. And if you are familiar with YouTube, although you can use it for some wonderful educational factors and for videos, but it's hard to control the advertisements and the media that show up on the sidebars. And a lot of times, those things can be very inappropriate, especially for middle and even elementary school kids. But they have full access to that as well. And in addition to that, Google Drive. And we'll look at some of the features about Google Drive and some of the things that have happened with students using Google Drive and how that's impacted their and things in the classroom. Now, one policy in particular that I want to look at is policy 237, which is part of section 2, and then even section 3. Now, one kind of alarming attribute about this is that it was not basically revised until, or hasn't been since September 13th of 2010. We're going back over 8 years. Now, I'm not going to read all logistics of the policy, but essentially the policy 237 outlines appropriate use of technology that is essentially not supposed to inhibit education. It's supposed to be used in a safe environment. It's not supposed to distract, harass, or threaten any student or staff. Students are, in fact, in the high school, they're allowed to carry personal cell phones during school hours. Certain times, middle school students they're allowed to use cell phones as well. But most importantly, they are allowed to use their laptops, and their laptops are essentially have been given this almost the same capability as a personal cell phone. Now, Section 3 of this policy basically outlines what the district considers a personal electronic device. And you can pretty much sum this up as anything that can connect to the internet whether it be a cell phone, a CD case, tape players, digital cameras, etc. All of these things are considered by the district as some form of personal electronic device. Now, what we want to do is we want to look at some cases that have come up in the past about the abuse of technology. And this first case, Bell versus Itawamba County School Board, basically the judge ruled in favor of the district where a student was actually engaging in cyberbullying of, of teachers and slash coaches. And I found this to be very interesting. I'm also the varsity golf coach, and we have some strict policies about what uses of technology that the kids can use when they're out on the golf course. Um, there's a Rosario was the second case where another basketball player was using social media to post negative, offensive tweets about people within the district. And this was occurring in off hours at time periods. And the Kalowski case was the cheerleader who was using social media to bully members of her cheering squad. So what we see are three distinct cases where social media is being used in a very inappropriate way. And luckily for these particular school districts, they have come down pretty hard on the kids and have revisited their policies. Now, when I look at some of the issues that have come up at Penn Manor specifically, um, going back to 2013, this is always a very difficult topic to discuss, but the suicide rate among students at Penn Manor has increased pretty exponentially since 2013. So in the past 5 years, we've had far more cases than we should ever have, period. Avito, an anti-bullying club that is now up in Penn Manor, recently took a survey, and middle and high school students all basically said that over 85% of the kids have either witnessed or have been bullied at some point during their school tenure, basically from online bullying. We recently had a big crackdown this year. We had 280 students, all part of one Google Hangout. It was started by a few students, and then before you know it, before the end of the school day, 280 students were all part of this one hangout. And apparently, I don't know the context of all the language, but the counselor and administration said that there was a tremendous amount of bullying, very inappropriate, at times pornographic communication, vulgar language, and it was from a large majority of the students. In Manor Middle School, we have about 480 students, so we had over 50% of the kids in one hangout. The increase in the amount of students who are on technology restrictions, the administration, specifically at Manor, I can attest to, have been very inundated with students who have laptop restrictions, who cannot take them home, or may need to leave them in the office now because of mismanagement. And we're finding that these kids are too young to be able to handle the amount of technology that they're being exposed to. And it's becoming very problematic for a lot of the classroom teachers. And the policy being so outdated, it needs to be revised. It should be looked at once again so that we can kind of put classroom teachers a little bit at ease, and they can focus more on education as opposed to managing inappropriate use of laptops. Some of the recommendations that I would strongly present to the board is revisiting the technology use and acceptable use policies, and not just looking at the policy, but having clear violation infractions and levels of infractions. What happens when a student bullies another, or if they're misusing social media, or if they're saying things that are inappropriate to a teacher? It shouldn't necessarily be on a student by student or a case by case situation. I get that has to happen at times, but there needs to be a clear indication of what is going to happen and the level of infractions for each specific student. And then more so, we really need to reduce the amount